All right. So after that brief technological interlude, are you good? Okay, awesome. And, no, don't be. Don't be. I am clearly very formal. About 20 years ago, I came over to Audubon, Florida, which, if you're not familiar, is the oldest statewide conservation organization in Florida. We are the largest state program of the National Audubon Society. And for the last 7 of those years, I've been the executive director. But at my heart, I am a bird watcher. So what I wanted to share with you guys tonight is my strongly held conviction that mammals are completely overrated, why that is, and why birds are better. So I actually think that we have animal crackers and Teddy Roosevelt to blame, and this is why. So come on, advance. Help a sister out, advance. Okay. All right. So have you ever pondered animal crackers? Have you ever? Okay. It is always this random assortment of mammals, tigers. Sometimes they even have them in multiple postures. You'll have like a sitting bear and a standing bear, as if that weren't enough bears already. Then on top of this, we have the zoo industrial complex. Okay. So I think that the overabundance of mammals in zoos all stems from this like great white hunter idea of the 1800s on safari in Africa. Sir William Cornwall Harris, our own president, Teddy Roosevelt, even up into the 70s, these exciting ads about going out and finding every ungulate you possibly can in Africa. And it also stemmed the collection of said ungulates, which bled over into the zoo space. So who has ever found themselves on the second half of a day at a zoo? You're tired, it's hot, you're at the back of the park, and you find yourself mired in the land of ruminants, the land of cud chewers and hooves, and they never end. For example, okay, so you've got your bongos, you've got your dik-diks. Okay. Not a dik-dik, this is a dweeker. Okay, it looks very similar, but dweeker. Okay, kudu. Okay, I'll give him cred. He's got cool horns. But then you also have a poodoo. Sounds the same, slightly different. Okay, then next looks like a poodoo, but is actually a muntjac. Okay, there is no reason why there should be this many hoofed mammals available for you to peruse at a zoo when the diversity of animal life on this planet is so much broader. And I know I sound a bit like Jan Brady, mammals, 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 but this is legitimate because if you think about all of the animals on the planet, okay, all of the animals, the mammals are really only about 5% of all of them. They're that green segment that's up there in the middle, okay? The blue is arthropods. The insects are going to rule the world, okay? For that green segment, so not mammals. Those are chordates, not mammals. Chordates are the green. So basically vertebrates. 95% of them are vertebrates. So we'll just call them that, okay? And then of those chordates, if you look at this, mammals are only 8% of chordates. So mammals are 8% of chordates. Chordates are 5% of all of animals. Mammals are basically 0.1% of all of the animals that are described on this planet. 0.1. Yes. So I am here to tell you that I think there is too much attention being given to dik-diks. Instead, we should all be on team bird, okay? That nice big red pie section. Now, okay, fish, yeah, what fish are bird food, okay? Just so we're clear, This is part of the unsupported opinion part of the talk, and then I'll start spitting facts in just a second. Okay, so birds, of course, the most exciting thing about them, because who cannot get excited about them? For many of these other categories, flight is the exception rather than the rule for birds. Flight is the rule rather than the exception. And it is not just that gliding haphazard nonsense that flying squirrels do. Okay, we're talking fully powered, flapping, altitude gaining flight that takes on flights of fancy. And one of the most exceptional of these flyers here in Florida that I know and love is the magnificent frigate bird. So you guys probably know aspect ratios, the ratio between the length of the wing and the width. When you've got a really narrow, long wing like this, it means that you can soar forever and ever with very little flapping. It also means it's really hard to take off. So frigate birds, which you'll often see in kind of on the Gulf Coast in Central Florida, all the way down to the Keys and the Marquesas and the Tortugas, these guys are such accomplished soarers that they can't land on the water. If they land on the water, they can't get enough lift to take off. Okay, they are so committed to flight that they have evolved past the ability to get off the water if they land. These guys, these are European common swifts. This guy has the record for amount of time spent flying. Based on a data logger, common swifts have been documented flying for 10 straight months. Okay, the only time that they land is when they come back to breed. So they go on migration, they sleep on the wing, they eat on the wing, they drink on the wing, they do everything on the wing. The only thing that can tether them back to ground again is the need to reproduce and the fact that babies are a very heavy thing. So any mammals among us who have carried a child in the past know that it is not a lighter than air endeavor. And so, as you know, birds have had to concede that fact by letting the embryo grow as much as they can until it frankly compromises their ability to make their living, which includes flight, at which point it's exported as an egg. And this is the thing that tethers birds to the ground. Now, they have strategies to combat this, of course. Some of them, unfortunately, they have altricial young. Altricial young. Sorry, I got it backwards. And these are those featherless, closed-eyed, fragile-looking babies that are completely helpless at birth. But many of them have developed to have precocial young. And what that means is that the babies come out of the eggs ready to go. One of the most accomplished of these precocial birds in Florida, I think, is the snowy plover. So this little guy is a beach nesting bird. And the really remarkable thing, so these birds, they lay their eggs directly on the sand. And if you could imagine a maternity ward in the full heat of the Florida sun, being swept by wind and storms, surrounded by salt water, this is where they choose to lay their eggs and raise their chicks. But as soon as the baby hatches, this bird is up and on the go. It is feeding itself, it is exploring, and the parents will often move it several miles down the beach under its own power on its first day after hatching. In order to aid with this, a lot of precocial birds also have a remarkable technique, which is that multiple eggs that are laid in the nest, one at a time, sometimes days apart, as they're approaching hatching, they will start to synchronize. And so inside of the eggs, they will start making little noises that tell the eggs that are ahead, slow down a little bit, and tells the ones that were laid last to speed up a little bit, so that even if they were laid several days apart, they all end up hatching simultaneously. And that makes it so that mom and dad can move them, can take them with them, and go back on the road again, not be tethered to that specific location. And move they do. So what the heck is this thing? This is an engraving from medieval Europe when people would see birds disappear in the fall and had no human idea where they went. For the longest time, they actually thought that they were hibernating in the mud under lakes. And so this is an engraving of fishermen hauling in their nets and dredging up swallows. In fact, we know that this is no longer the case through science. And now we understand that millions and millions and millions of birds are washing back and forth across our hemisphere every fall and every spring like tides while we sleep. And so this is a map that actually shows the routes of many of those species. But how did we figure all of this out? Well, the first step was bird banding. So you can see that this biologist has captured this yellow-breasted chat and is placing a band on its leg that has a code on it so that if the bird is captured again in a different location, it can be reported. And then there's 2 points of data where the bird was captured and banded the first time and where it was recaptured and noted the second time. But you can imagine that's kind of a difficult prospect. I mean, with all of those birds migrating and washing back across the hemisphere like tides every year, the likelihood of catching any bird once is slim. The likelihood of catching that same bird in a different location a second time, it's extraordinary. And so for the longest time, this was the effort. It was banding as many birds as you could in the hopes that there would be a small but significant recovery to help to make those connections. Well, over time, we got a little more clever. So we started using tags that have readable alphanumeric codes that we would put on in addition to those silver U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service codes, and also color bands. And those unique combinations mean that instead of having to recover the bird in order to read the band, with a pair of binoculars or a spotting scope, you can actually identify what bird that is. And by doing this, we were suddenly able to track the daily movements of birds too and understand who was acting in what ways on their local territories. We also started to understand how old birds are. So this is a roseate spoonbill that Audubon banded, and 18 years later, it was recited, expanding the knowledge of exactly how old these birds grow to be. We also learned things like how big their territories are, whether they mate for life, whether fidelity is more of a suggestion rather than a rule. The latter is the case for snowy plovers. Pro tip, the ladies are the ones that like to step out. And but we wouldn't know these things without this kind of science. And then getting even more sophisticated, there's satellite tracking, and one of the newest technologies is called MODIS. So the tower that you see behind these people is located at Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary, one of Audubon's properties in Naples, Florida. And a MODIS tower is basically a little tiny electronic tag that is added to the bird. And it functions, I like to think of it kind of like the checkout at Publix. So anytime that bird flies within about 5 miles of any of these towers, ping, that data gets logged and it's known which bird that is and all of the places that, or the place that it was tagged, as well as any of the other towers that it has pinged off of on its migration. This is a bird, a lesser yellowlegs, that pinged the tower at Corkscrew in August of 2024. And when we went back to look at its data where it had been tagged, if it had pinged any other towers, it told a really powerful story. So the bird was originally tagged, oops, wrong way. Not a lesser yellowlegs. There we go. The bird was originally tagged by another Audubon biologist in Cali, Colombia that spring. So when it was on its wintering grounds in Colombia, that's when it first got its tag. Then we know that it flew north. You can do it. And it pinged off of towers in Missouri. And then it went off the grid. We know that it went to James Bay, Ontario. This is where they all breed. Before coming back onto the network, hitting Iowa, Kentucky, the Carolinas, before we read it at Corkscrew in Naples. The really exciting thing about this is after we looked up all of this information and we kept monitoring this bird, don't you know, the same lesser yellowlegs 2 months later shows up again in Cali, Colombia, where it was banded just the last year. So birds are one of those exciting things that help us, I think, also to put the work and the conservation that we do into context. Yeah. We all care about the place that we are. And we think of birds as our birds, but really, they're just on loan to us. They're our birds while they're here, and then there's somebody else's birds when they're on the way. And so it also raises the importance of the work that we're doing in any one location, because every single one of the links in that chain has to remain intact in order for that bird to get back to Columbia again the next year. And if you think that migration is impressive, let's talk about bristle-thighed curlews. I know it's a mouthful, right? So another shorebird. These aren't in Florida. They actually live and breed in Western Alaska. These guys, they fly 3,500 miles, takes them 4 days, non-stop over the Pacific Ocean. So they winter on tiny islands in Oceania. Can you even imagine 4 days, no eating? It's not like there's like a pit stop that they can stop and rest. It's get there or land in the drink. And then for our shores, we have red knots. So these guys nest on the tundra. Many of them winter in extreme Tierra del Fuego. The really crazy thing about these birds, as well as the bristle-thighed curlews, is the adults leave weeks in advance of the kids. So when they're on their southbound migration, the adults are gone. They've all been gone for weeks already before the kids depart. So that navigation map, they don't have Google Maps, they don't have GPS. It is all programmed genetically into their brains, exactly where it is that they should go. And so these are red knots on their way back north. Now, the interesting thing about this, I didn't mess up the photos. The one isn't squished. The birds on the left with those orange tags, they spent the winter in Tierra del Fuego in Argentina, the southern tip of South America. And you can see they are skinny. They are skin and bones. When these birds arrive in Northeast Florida, if you see their scat, it is literally bile. There is nothing there. And over the course of about 2 weeks, they go from this to this Rubenesque beauty here. They basically pack on as much weight as they possibly can before they head for the Arctic, because when they get there, they're going to do the business of building a nest. The ladies are going to do the energetically expensive job of growing an egg, all before their food source has emerged. So not only do we have these physiological feats, but we also have this idea that these birds are going back and forth. Many of them are kids, unassisted, with these genetic maps in their heads. And they are navigating, get this, they are navigating based on cues of the stars, the direction of polarized light. And we know that they can also see the Earth's magnetic field. So they have magnetite in their bills, and it's now better understood that there is that they exploit the quantum effects of an eye protein in order to visualize that magnetic field to orient them regardless of the conditions that they're flying in. And so you think about things like a ruby-throated hummingbird. Who's got hummingbirds in their yard feeding on that? Yeah, Tallahassee is lousy with hummingbirds. It's just one of our great blessings. So these guys will fly 15 to 24 hours nonstop across the Gulf of Mexico. So an adult male hummingbird weighs about 3 grams. So that's the weight of 3 paper clips. And when they are preparing to migrate across the water, they will pack on the weight, nearly doubling their weight. So they'll get to about 6 grams. And then those little porkers, bless them, they take off across the water, but it is energetically expensive. They have to have good winds. They have to have favorable weather, because by the time they reach the Yucatan, they'll be down to 2.5 grams. Can you imagine losing half of your body weight in less than a day's time? It's extraordinary. And it's one reason why the quality of our habitat at our coasts is so important, because birds, when they are arriving after these long overwater flights, they are literally coasting in to the rest stop on fumes, and they need the first place they can rest, the first place they can feed. And we're fortunate in Florida to have so many coastal state parks, in particular, national wildlife refuges, wildlife management areas that make all the difference for species like these. And they also take advantage of the weather. So this is a Hudsonian whimbrel. One of the things I love about this bird is it has been documented with satellite tags exploiting tailwinds from Hurricane Irma. And it was clocked flying at 100 miles per hour. 100 miles per hour. Now, I'm sure that it had a hard time when it was on the other side of the storm and it was headwinds. It was probably a rough 8 miles an hour at that point. But these are not birds for the faint of heart, and they work with what's made available to them. Similarly with weather, sometimes birds get caught up in weather. So you may remember from when Hurricane Idalia swept through the straits between the Yucatan and the tip of Cuba, there were lots of flamingos that got caught up in that storm and carried them to our shore. You may remember there were flamingos all over Florida. They were also in Georgia and South Carolina and North Carolina and New York and Cape Cod and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. It was crazy. Okay. So many of these birds end up inadvertently being dispersed by these. And for Audubon's part, we're actually very hopeful that this may help bring back flamingos. So flamingos historically bred in Florida. They were shot out for the plume trade around 1900, and now they no longer breed in our state. So between pioneering birds that come visit the Everglades in the winter after they're finished breeding, to these vagrants, we know that more than 100 flamingos stayed in Florida through the breeding season after this event. They're not breeding yet, but it gives us a reason for hope and also a reason to redouble our efforts to restore the Everglades, which they would depend on for breeding. And then finally with weather, so many of those birds, remember the millions washing back across the hemisphere, there's so many of them that we can often see them on weather radar. So while this looks like tremendous storms, and there are a few storms on this, all of that at the southern tip of Florida there, that's not rain. Those are birds. Those are migrants. So we can actually watch when the wind directions are prevailing during migratory season. Huge numbers of birds, for example, lifting off of Cuba, coming across the straits and making landfall in the Keys in southern Florida. Similarly, with big roosts, we can see things like this roost ring. So this is just one down in Everglades City that was captured. It was likely American tree swallows. And so it's really funny because at certain times of day during the right season, it actually looks like these rings are blooming across parts of the state as the birds are taking flight after their long night. So that's all the classical, yay, birds can travel. But I also have some goofy personal reasons why I especially love birds. So one of them is that birds are metal. Okay, at their heart, they are straight up metal. So what is this? Like you see that hornworm there, that caterpillar. How did that caterpillar end up on that barbed wire? There is not a tomato plant to be seen. Okay, it's not like it fell from the sky and miraculously got speared on that. The culprit here is actually a loggerhead shrike, so also known as a butcher bird. These birds catch their prey, and for a number of reasons, they like to impale them. So some scientists say that it's because they don't have raptor feet to actually clutch their prey, and so they use a thorn or a barbed wire barb to immobilize it. We know that they sometimes skewer things like lubber grasshoppers because they have noxious chemicals in them. And if they stay there long enough, those chemicals leach out, making it more, we'll call it palatable. Sometimes they put them there as a larder. I'm just going to save this lizard for later. And sometimes it's thought to demonstrate fitness of the male. The male is decorating his territory for his lady, showing her the quality of his territory as well as his prowess. So I'm telling this to you because next time you are in barbed wire country, I challenge you to look more closely at those barbs. Once you know this thing, you will never be able to not look at barbed wire again. My teenager and I frequently do this. We see bugs, we see lizards, we see small birds sometimes. I think the best thing that we've ever found, though, what did we find, Marsh? Shout it out.
Oh, a bat.
A bat. We found a bat that a loggerhead shrike had impaled. So birds are metal, right? In addition to loggerhead shrikes being metal, I will just say, I also think that peregrine falcons are metal. So peregrine falcons are the world's fastest animal in a stoop. They can be clocked at 240 miles per hour. Alarming. And everybody thinks that when they get their prey, that they are just grabbing it. Oh, no, 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 no. They are balling up their fist and they are knocking the tar out of that thing. And then once it has been clipped, they end up catching it. So they are the bruisers of the sky. People call them the tigers of the sky or the cheetahs. No, they are the bruisers of the sky because they are just as metal as those loggerhead shrikes. Another reason that I really love birds is that they are resourceful. So this is a great Florida story. So Everglades snail kites are a raptor in Florida. There's also a separate subspecies in Latin America, both of which almost exclusively eat apple snails. So native Florida apple snails, which this bird has here, are smaller and they're also more vulnerable to changes in water quality. And we've had extreme problems with water quality extirpating native snails from a lot of our water bodies. This drastically affected snail kites, and we saw radical declines in their population. Interestingly, a newbie arrived. And those are invasive exotic apple snails. And this is the only time you will ever hear me say anything, even remotely, mediocrely, close to positive about an invasive species. Okay, I'm not conceding this point entirely. However, these resourceful snail kites figured out that they could go after these apple snails instead. Unfortunately, it was touch and go there for a little while because these snails are so much bigger. Look how big that is relative to the bird's foot, that especially the young kites simply were not good enough at manipulating those snails and eating enough of them per hour in order to meet their metabolic budget. And so many of the young birds weren't surviving because they couldn't eat enough of them fast enough. Speed up, natural selection, man. It's fierce. And the species has pushed through that bottleneck. The birds that were able to exploit the larger snails survived to breed. The ones that couldn't, didn't. And now it's no longer a problem. We've seen a recovery in the young bird survival. Interestingly enough, these invasive apple snails, which unfortunately love filthy drainages, are in drainages all over the state now. And so the snails are following them too. So the birds are following them too. Yeah. So while Everglades snail kites predominantly were only found in the Everglades and Lake Okeechobee, there's now a huge breeding population on Payne's Prairie of all places. And we now even have them breeding here in Tallahassee down on Lake Munson. Crazy pants, crazy pants. All right, crazy pants, that's the technical term. All right. Another example of innovation, least turn. So remember, this is another one of those birds I told you about that lays their eggs directly on the sandy beach in that harsh environment of sun and salt and sand and wind. And the birds, they have to actually shelter the eggs and chicks from the sun and from predators. So they're actually shading them and keeping them cool instead of what you would think of as incubating, keeping them warm. Now, one of the challenges is that Florida's beaches are so busy that people are constantly flushing them off their eggs and chicks if they're unprotected. And that leaves those eggs and chicks vulnerable to being stepped on, being predated, or cooking in the sun in a matter of minutes. So given that there aren't as many undisturbed beaches in Florida as there once were, least terns, American oyster catchers, black skimmers, they have all started nesting on flat gravel rooftops in Florida. They're basically beaches in the sky. Less than ideal. I would rather that they all had beaches, and admittedly flat gravel rooftops are being phased out. So there's new challenges afoot. But it just gives me a little bit of hope with this idea that birds can be resilient and they can be resourceful if we're able to give them a little bit of help along the way. Another reason why birds are cool, they actually do stuff for us. Yeah, everybody knows the whole canary in a coal mine thing, protecting us from poisonous gases before we could monitor them ourselves. They're good pollinators for some crops. They also clean up after us and everybody else a lot, so don't malign the noble carrion eaters. They are a great proxy for helping us to monitor the health of our environment as well as the effectiveness of restoration. So they're basically living models for systems whose parameters we may understand, but may not understand fully. And so they help us, frankly, to check our work and to see if we're getting our restoration efforts right, like in the Everglades. But one of the best things that I credit them for are enchiladas and curry and the gumbo that we like to eat. And not because of the chickens, they're aside, but because of what effects they've had on the things that they eat themselves. So this is a cedar waxwing that you guys may be familiar with. They zoom around Tallahassee in the winter, feeding on any berry they can find. They particularly like those Palatka hollies that you see on our street sides. They also decimate my mulberry trees every year. So huge berry eaters. And you guys all know that plants don't just grow berries for the fun of it. They didn't wake up one morning and say, I'm going to make something delicious. They are doing something to induce the folks that are eating their berries to help them. What's at the heart of that berry? A seed. So if you're a plant, remember, the name of the game is to disperse, to spread, to conquer the world. And so the one who wins is the one who can get their seed to go the furthest. Well, if you were something stationary and you wanted your seed to go the furthest, you need it to hitch a ride with something that moves. You could pick something slow, like a turtle, or you could pick something that might stray a little bit further, like a mammal. But wouldn't it be really cool if you could get a bird to take you further? But you don't want to waste like your seeds on those mammals or those turtles. You only want the birds to eat them. So what do? Well, as luck would have it, birds don't have capsaicin receptors. So that capsaicin is that lovely, lovely chemical that makes peppers spicy. And so peppers found the cheat code, basically. So they know that their fruits will only be eaten or mostly be eaten by birds because everybody else thinks it's too spicy. And we as humans have then figured out that we like the capsaicin too because we're gluttons for punishment. So every time you have curry or you eat an enchilada, be sure that you're thanking the birds. And then, of course, they bring us song. So this isn't a scientific thing. This is just a beauty thing. So when you wake up in the morning and you hear a wood thrush on those few mornings every spring that they're moving through Tallahassee, or that cardinal or that Carolina wren that just will not stop outside your window, that is adding to our quality of life. Okay. They are our mascots and our emblems and our points of national pride, team pride, school pride. They keep us company in our rural farmyards, in our urban schoolyards, even in our prison yards. I know when I drive by the federal penitentiary out on Cap Circle, that's always lousy with purple martins. I'm always glad for the ladies in there that they have them for company. I'm not joking. I actually like that. And they also help us keep track of the passage of time. So I'm one of those goofy people who marks the months in the birds that litter my world. So cedar waxwings that I talked about earlier, One of the things that I love most about Tallahassee in the winter, especially when I'm downtown going to the Capitol and everybody is click-clacking across the marble in their heels and paying attention to their phone, is that they are completely ignorant of the flights of fancy that are going on overhead as these immense flocks of birds, slightly drunk on fermented berries, are wheeling around and taking extraordinary risks, especially with the crazy way that those February winds blow through the tall buildings downtown. It is a spectacle like no other, and it's one that I look forward all year long and lightens those mornings on my way to the big building. The return of prothonotary warblers every spring. So previously called golden swamp warblers, which I actually prefer, shh, don't tell. These guys, they literally look like somebody grabbed them by the butt and dunked them in the sun. They are that yellow. And they live in these dark, tannic cypress swamps, tupelo swamps, kai swamps here in the Florida Panhandle. And because of that, in that darkness, they just look like they're glowing from within. Again, they're not here all year long, which makes them that much more special when they are. Scarlet tanagers, holy cow. Not only are they red, but the red isn't chemical, it's actually refractory, okay? So it's physics red, it's not chemistry red. Again, they're only here briefly on their way through in the spring. And so when you get to see, when you know, it's that much more special because the very next day they'll be gone again. My summers, just so you guys know, there may be like astronomical declarations of the start of summer. I personally do not consider summer to start in Tallahassee until I have heard the following three birds' calls in the same day. So the first is always Eastern kingbird. They're always the first one to come. The next is common nighthawk. You're on notice. I heard them flying over FAMU on Monday night. And so the last one that I need to hear all in the same day for it to finally be summer coming soon is least terns. And so historically, they used to nest on flat gravel rooftops in Tallahassee. There aren't as many of those gravel rooftops anymore. So admittedly, summer's getting a little later these years because there aren't as many in town. But I'm telling you, it'll be here any day now. And then I will officially declare summer for all of us. Yellow warblers, the second week of August, start to move through, especially down at St. Mark's. They actually give me hope because by that point in the summer, it's oppressively hot. And even though it feels like it's never going to end, when I see them, I know that the end is in sight. Mississippi kites, as they depart, I get a little bit sad. They nest in my neighborhood. I hear them calling every day. There were actually 5 circling over the road on the way in here just this evening. And I know that I won't see them again until the spring. So admittedly, I get a little nostalgic in the fall, wondering if each one that I see is going to be the last one for several months. And on it goes. The other great thing about birds is they will take you, or the pursuit of them will take you places that you never otherwise would have gone. You'll find yourself in situations you might not have expected. And they'll also bring community to you that you would not otherwise have found. And I will just say that like all of the people in this room, Dicks did not bring you together, okay? You came for the birds. So there is clearly some rationality to my argument. Now that said, okay, I'm not saying that mammals are horrible. I'm just saying that they're overrated. I do have a particular affection for this ruminant, okay? All of the hair on my black clothes will betray the fact that I have particular affection for this mammal. I have deranged appreciation for some reason for southeastern pocket gophers. They are just like the weirdest little like agents of subterranean sandhill chaos, okay, that you will find in North Florida. All of those little sand piles, they can stay, all right, because pocket gophers are weird and I'm here for it. And then admittedly, this mammal enjoys enjoys my most favored mammal status in my world, but doesn't have to be in everyone's world. It's a mom requirement to embarrass your child who just graduated. So so you know, like Wilson's plover with babies, not six-legged with babies, stuffed under the wings. Like birds are weird, and I'm here for it because I'm weird too. And you know, they are a font of curiosity for me and constant lifelong learning and complete indulgence in science. They are also a source of adventure, a source of community, and despite whatever may be going on around me, they're always also a constant reminder to keep looking up. So I hope that I have convinced you we love mammals. Birds are better. And I hope that, like me, you'll keep looking up too. So thank you for coming out tonight. How does this go? Any other questions, or do I just hang out?
Oh, any questions?
I'm happy to do anything. I'm happy to hang out if that's better, so that people can get drinks.
Oh, they can get drinks?
Yes.
Yeah, we can do both.
I'm happy to answer questions. Also get drinks. I'm not offended if you get drinks.
You want to repeat questions?
I'm happy to repeat questions. Absolutely. Yeah.
So we have a bunch of hummingbirds going up.
Yeah.
Someone told us that they're like passing through, man. There's not like a crew up there. Is that true? It seems like there's so many. Are they just really like traveling?
So the question was, I have lots of hummingbirds in my yard. Someone told me they're just passing through. Is that real? And it's yes and no. You like that? You like that? Yeah. So, well, no. So we do have some that breed here. So there are some that are coming back and are making nests. And you're probably seeing them a lot coming and going from your plants because they got work to do feeding themselves and their kids. But we are also on the way between here and there for the ones that are nesting further north. And so, you know, you saw how much weight they lose as they go. They have to feed up constantly as they go. And so they are taking full advantage of that as they go. They're also really territorial. So they make themselves known. Anytime you have more than one, anytime N equals 2 or more, you know, so you can't miss them. Good. Of course.
Is it helpful to put out like
The question is it helpful to put out feeders? And I will say that yes, it can be, especially in the winter. We have lots of hummingbirds that actually stay here through the winter that people don't realize. And sometimes even rare Western hummingbirds, they do like this weird misdirected migration where some of them take a hard left turn at Albuquerque and they end up here. But the thing to remember about hummingbird feeders is that don't put any of that dye in them. Okay, make it clear. It just needs to be water and sugar. Keep it clean. But even better than that is native plants. So those plants are what they are evolved to eat. And in addition to supporting hummingbirds, it also supports any number of other plant animals too. So up with firebush and all of the other coral vine and all the other good things. They are. That's why I noted in particular in the winter, sometimes it can be helpful. We have a lot of blooming, winter blooming native plants too. I have a, what is it? Is it a cardinal bush that goes all winter, but I will note that with that hard freeze that we had this winter, even it could not make it. And so at that moment, maybe you could like find something in your heart, but yes, native plants always better. Yeah.
What drives birds to flightlessness?
What drives birds to?
Flightlessness.
Oh, what causes birds to evolve flightlessness? Well, it's a number of things. So some of it is they don't have predators in that location that they need to worry about. So oftentimes you will see flightless birds in on islands that are protected, especially from mammalian predators. Rats are like the scourge of everything. Sometimes they'll evolve that way because they've gotten so big that it's really expensive to fly. Things like ostriches. Some it's because they want to exploit another mode of transportation, like swimming. Have you ever seen a penguin swim underwater? It kind of looks like flying. So it's all a strategy for how they go about their life histories. But for the most part, like I said, flightedness is the rule rather than the exception as compared to poor flight impoverished mammals. It's not their fault. They're just lesser. So anybody else? Yeah.
When you were talking about putting ring bands on birds, I got this thought. All right, so you track the motion, the traveling of birds who are stupid enough to be caught twice. So did the patterns confirm when a more elaborate ways of tracking developed?
Oh, isn't that clever? So Ilya's question is, for tracking with bands, you have a weakness because you're only catching birds that are stupid enough to be caught. Okay, that's fair. That is fair. But I will say that we're kind of clever too. So the mist nets that are used are nearly invisible to birds as they are flying. Also for shorebirds, for example, there are rocket nets, there are spring traps. I mean, it's like a whole Scooby-Doo episode. But yes, when other modes like weather ornithology, for example, satellite ornithology with radar, has confirmed that the birds are moving to the same places. But even when you're using satellite tagging or MODIS tagging, you still have to catch the bird. So could there still be that small error, could there be a bird Einstein out there that is defying all the odds? Yes, but I like to think that the repetition and the repeated results likely rule it out. Higher degree of confidence. But yes, you're right. Yeah, John.
So we're talking about the MODIS, the tracking with the antenna. I'm curious if they're using any of the latest stuff they're getting on butterflies with the Bluetooth receivers. Are they doing that with birds too?
They are. So John just asked, he's really interested in MODIS, which you'll remember was that electronic tag that blips the towers like the scanner at Publix. There's also a newer tag that uses Bluetooth and can actually use cell phone networks. They are experimenting with using that to a limited extent, but one of the challenges of that is the flight height of migratory birds. So cell phones in your pocket, by and large, are at ground level. And so oftentimes the detection is not great for migrating birds. Monarchs, which they're using it on more extensively, are lower flyers, and so it's more accurate for them. But yeah, we're all kind of watching that excitedly, especially because, it's easy to find people with cell phones, but it costs money and effort to put up a tower and to continue to maintain and operate. Yeah, Carrie.
What species of birds lay eggs on the sand here in our neighborhood?
So the question was, what species of birds lay eggs on the sand here in our neighborhood? So round nesters in Tallahassee, you will find occasionally nighthawks. So common nighthawks will lay on the ground, especially in pine woods. You will also find occasionally, well, not so often in Tallahassee. You'll also find ground doves that will lay on the ground, and their babies are like raven black. So sometimes that will help tip you off if you haven't seen the adult. But not as many that lay directly on the sand in town. Down at the coast, it's things like least terns, Wilson's plovers, snowy plovers, black skimmers, American oyster catchers.
On our part of the boat here.
On the beach, yes. Anybody else? Everyone's thirsty. Good. Well, I will linger. Get yourself a drink, get some food. My kid endorses the tamales. And thank you, Ilya, so much for having me tonight. Carrie, too.